Let the dragon consume you! Enemy sighted. Stop the payload! Stop the payload! In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And we're back. Welcome to episode 60 of the Bird Watchers. I'm your host, Ryan. In this episode, we're talking about the 2019 Overwatch League Grand Finals. So I'm glad to be back. It's been a bit. I missed y'all. So let's just hop into it, right? We reached the end. We finally crowned a champion. But first, we're going to talk about a little bit of news. So Overwatch Contenders Gauntlet Watch Party still going to happen. We have that planning in the works. Since the season's over for Overwatch League, we're moving to Contenders. So we're going to cheer on the Atlanta Academy in classic fashion. The hype doesn't stop just because the Overwatch League season did. But we don't have a date. They let us know that it's going to be in a week, but we don't know exactly when our team is playing. So once we figure that out, we'll get stuff posted. So keep an eye on the Atlanta Royal Family Twitter, Meetup, etc. Bird Watchers accounts, make sure you're following those. On Reddit, we'll announce it. But outside of that, the other big piece of news was we had a PTR patch come out in the little hiatus we had while I was in Philly. So let's run through the PTR real quick and see what they put out. So this came out on the 24th of September, and they kind of touched everything. A lot of people, there were discussions on the competitive Overwatch Reddit that they wanted Blizzard to revert some of the changes they made as they tried to combat GOATs before they just decided to do role lock. So what happened here is you can see a lot of characters being pushed back to where they were before the whole GOAT shenanigans happened, the goating or whatever you want to call it. So we start with D.Va. D.Va's defensive matrix, they increased the regeneration rate from 12.5% to 16% per second. They delayed the regeneration when the regeneration begins, and it's lowered from 1 second to 0.75. Sorry, I'm a little tongue twisted. I got to get used to talking on the mic again. It's been a while. Orisa, protective barrier, cooldown increase from 9 to 10 seconds. A lot of people talk about the ability for her to loop that shield being a little bit too powerful at some times. Roadhog, trying to bring him back into the thick of things by giving him another shot. Scrap gun ammunition is increased from 5 to 6. Sigma, obviously one of the tanks that's been talked about contentiously about being too powerful, doing too much damage. You can see this in the stats after certain games. But Kinetic Grasp no longer blocks Chain Hook or Whip Shot. Don't think that's huge, just for more crowd control purposes. Gravitic Flux, high gravity effect duration reduced from 1.2 to 0.9 seconds. A little bit change there. That should help. Experimental barrier. So this is to stop the strategy of the spamming of the barrier constantly and try to incentivize different types of play. Regeneration rate is reduced from 175 to 150, but it now has a 1 second cooldown after every time you recall it. The initial cast time has also been removed. So now it's an instant cast, but you do have a 1 second delay in between each one. Now the Winston one was the one that came out of nowhere, which might be a big deal. They're trying to push him into metas that, aren't necessarily just dive focused, or, Winston does kind of drive, or he does drive dive comp because he's the leading character in those calls. Barrier protector duration increased from 6 to 9 seconds, so that's a third more, right? And then health increase from 600 to 700, so that's pretty big in my opinion. We'll see how it plays out. This is still fairly new, right, of a patch, and it's only on PTR, so this could change. This always they always do. But Baptiste immortality field, health increase from 250 or decrease from 250 to 200. I've seen some complaints about that on Reddit, but I never thought it was that big of a deal. It seemed like it was easy to deal with, but that helps, right? Lucio, so this is a push, pretty much a revert back to the old style of Lucio before the goats trying to fix it, right? Because they thought Lucio was a big part of it. But crossfade, speed boost effect increased from 20% to 25%. Amp it up, speed boost amplification increased from 50% to 60%. And wall ride speed reduced from 40% to 30%. So there's some good changes there for Lucio players. Mercy, a lot of memes and jokes about any small Mercy buff, and the Mercy mains are back at it. This gives an extra beams created by Valkyrie now ignore enemy barriers. That's kind of cool, right? Because barriers have been a big concern lately with the meta shift, so this should help. Biotic Grasp for Moira, self-healing reduced from 30 to 20 per second. Hopefully that helps because Moira has kind of been prevalent as far as a healer alongside Lucio. Doomfist, Rocket Punch, time to reach max charge increase from 1 to 1.4 seconds. So that's almost 50% increase. We'll see what that does. His defense as well, the shield health gained per hit reduced from 35 to 30. Not a big hit there. Sombra, Translocator, the cooldown increased from 4 to 6. And this is long, right? Because they pretty much try to touch every character, which is good to see since we had this lull of anything happening on PTR, which is probably in service of the grand finals to kind of leave focus there. But yeah, so Sombra, we have the cooldown increase from 4 to 6 seconds on the Translocator. Cooldown now begins immediately upon deploying the beacon, and if it is killed, or if it's killed by an enemy. Symmetra, Photon Barrier, duration reduced from 15 to 12 seconds, and health reduced from 5,000 to 4,000. We haven't been seeing much Symmetra lately with the shift to kind of this Bastion, and then you're seeing the May Reaper again, but we are seeing it sometimes on control maps. Sentry turrets, damage per second reduced from 50 to 40. That helps. Big component of, if you're going to have turrets, don't have them do too much damage, have them be more of a zoning type thing, because it kind of makes players feel like there's no skill involved. So when they die to one, it's kind of shitty. And then we have Photon Projector. Players impacted by the primary fire of the beam should now hear a loud impact sound. So that helps. We all know about the small Reaper change where they stopped his voice line and how big of a difference that made. So sound is good, noise is good. It gives you a head up. Tracer, to wrap things up here, Pulse Pistol damage fall off now starts at 13 meters instead of 10 meters. And there's a few other little small tweaks here that they always do. So, a good amount of changes there to get people hyped for post grand finals, trying to get people to, play again, trying to make tweaks in the right direction. There's already discussions about how fast, or the discussions have come up again about how fast Blizzard patches and how it's kind of slow compared to how popular the game is, and Blizzard functions off a smaller team, so those discussions are constantly going on, and they're not going to stop anytime soon. So next, I want to talk about the trip to Philly. So naturally, we missed an episode, unfortunately, but we made Grand Finals episode 60, so that's a silver lining. So I'm proud of that nice even number. But I was at Philly. I got to go to the game, got to go to Grand Finals at the Wells Fargo Center. And even before that, we went a day early. We got to see Martin Garrix live outside of Wells Fargo, and that was amazing. Zed was at, Zed performance you probably saw. That was great. He crushed it. Blizzard got it right. They got someone who plays the game, who's also a successful artist, who's liked by the community, and who's actually good at the game. They got the whole package, right? The complete opposite of the DJ Khaled situation. But that was exciting, right? The venue was insane. I mean, even having a homestand here, I didn't get to go to Grand Finals last year, but to have a homestand here and think that was crazy, and to see this, so many fans, it was crowded, people moving. The lines outside were insane. I got to meet a bunch of other Reign fans that don't live in Atlanta, which was cool. Got to hand out, some wristbands, make sure they got some love. They're now part of the family. Just got to talk to a lot of people, got recognized by a couple people, which was cool. From when I talked at Dragon Con, that was cool, and some other things like that. So shout out to you all. It was good meeting you guys. Glad y'all went out there to celebrate. So now when you talk about the match everybody's been talking about, right? There's nothing else to talk about. So spoilers, it's one match a day, but we're gonna go deep. We're gonna dig around, and we're gonna talk about some of the cool stuff, and I have something to say about matches and how they're represented, because I think this got a lot of slack from people who didn't see it and that said, oh wait, how did it end, versus the experience of actually watching it. And then on top of that, the experience of going to the event. But until then, let's go ahead and jump into it. So Shock versus Titans. I think no one's going to argue that, neither of these teams need to be here. Both these teams earned the right to be here, and they fight for it. So we start with Lijiang Tower, and I got some water because this is going to be one lengthy one because these matches kind of go with these maps. We start with Lijiang Tower, so if you hear me drinking, I apologize. If you hear any noise in the background, once again, peak hours in Atlanta. But we start with Lijiang Tower on Command Center, and Titans start with Twilight on Brig, which is an interesting choice, and this is to try to deal with Sinatra's Doomfist, but the plan doesn't really work, and Shock get this initial cap. Then Sinatra starts Havoc during the first half of the round, and Choi Ho-bin kind of takes over the Havoc in the second half, and Shock dominate this round to start the match. So good start for them. Shock usually come out the gate swinging and firing on all cylinders. Swinging because of Doomfist, firing on all cylinders because of Reaper. Okay. Night Market. So Titans look better here, and that's kind of due to Haksaal's Doomfist, which we know he's good on a lot of characters. So he goes on a rampage here, but at some point, and at some point this results in a Halt Meteor Strike combo that you'll see in every highlight from Overwatch from this point forward. Although Titans do get a solid lead here, the round begins to shift in the Shock's favor, and this leads to a final fight for the win, and Shock ended up taking the round and start these finals off 1-0. So then we go into Eichenwald next, and we start with a substitution. So we have Rascal and Architect subbing in for Sinatra and Striker, and this isn't something that's new. This is something we've seen before, where they like to have Rascal and Architect on cart-based maps, with Sinatra and Striker showing up on control-based maps, right? Things that involve capturing points. So Shock on attack first. Shock start with Bastion May combo. They cap point 1 fairly quickly, then they set up on cart, and they use this Baptiste amplification matrix, it's a mouthful, and nano rotation on the Bastion to just do damage throughout the remainder of the match. So this leads to them cruising through point 2. They are then able to dominate on point 3 because Architect pulls off this Bastion tank mode jump onto the chandelier you're familiar with, right in front of the cap point, and just rains death from above. There's nothing they can really do with it with the current comps without completely swapping their comp to something that just is not functional in this meta. So they finish it off. Shock gets a full cap, and then this is another move that will be talked about. Like, a lot of stuff in this game are going to be highlights in all the future Overwatch League, like promo stuff, because a lot of cool stuff happened. But Shock ended up full capping with 2 minutes and 49 seconds here. That's a lot of time. So this takes us to Titans next on attack, and Titans are up next, and Somin Su starts a rampage on Reaper. And remember, statistically, they keep mentioning it, and they like to talk about these cool little things that occur. So we have every time Somin Su gets the first kill, Titans win that fight, right? And that kind of shows here. They win the team fight, and they cap point 1, and then on point 2 they get a quick cap as well. But I want to bring attention to something that Janu does on Sigma, and it's because they actually follow him through the whole time he does this. So he goes through the castle, right, and he starts this initiation damn near perfectly, because the Shock have kind of given up the road to point 2, so they're setting up on point 2 to bunker down to prepare for that bridge fight. But what Janu does is, as Sigma goes in aggressively, he pushes his Sigma shield into them. He quickly ults, like ultimate, and immediately triggers it, right? He absorbs a good amount of damage after that from the Bastion fire, and then he starts primary firing while Bastion has to reload because of that time he burned. And at this point is when his team perfectly follows up, and they blow up the Shock barricade there and keep that momentum. This is a huge play in my opinion. Go back and watch it, because if you're playing Sigma and you're serious about playing Sigma, this is a good way to kind of use him, aggressively, because he doesn't really do well with gaps in fights. So if all your fights at the beginning and his initiative is to get Bastion in a reload mode or a vulnerable mode, this is the perfect way to do it, and it pays off for him here. So, they get that point. Then they're able to follow up and blow up Shock, and then Titans kind of continue that momentum they gained from that play to finish off with only 2 seconds less than the Shock. So this takes us to round 2. So Titans go first, and despite Rascal losing a battle against Twilight, he gets rezzed, and then he goes on a far rampage to help hold the Titans to about a tick and a half. Shock go next, and the Titans have a string of great defensive fights. It's pretty solid and it's pretty action-packed, but they dropped the final engagement due to some poor initiation that the Shock ended up flipping in their favor to cap and take the map and go up 2-0 and takes into halftime, where we got to hope that the Titans could get back on track, right? So Temple of Anubis. Honestly, I don't think this map should be allowed in any playoff situation. But here we are, and it turns out to be an actual good map. So we have Sinatra and Striker coming back in, because remember, it's a capture style map. So they substitute Rascal and Architect. And we start with Titans on attack. And Titans look a bit cleaner as they start this map with a quick 0.1, but Shock stabilize and Titans cap 0.2 with a greatly reduced time bank than they started with at 134. Takes us to Shock on attack. The Shock do the opposite of the Titans, and they struggle on 0.1, but then roll through 0.2 with about 2:12 remaining. And the impressive thing here is because the Shock struggle on 0.1, so they don't have ultimates really for 0.2, but they're able to win this raw fight with no ultimates against a Titans team that does have them by just getting solid picks. It looks like their calls are right. They're focusing properly. It's great to watch. This takes us to round 2. Titans go first. They cap 0.1 on the back of a huge Sominsu ultimate, but then they're stopped right in their tracks on their 0.2 attempt because they don't have much time. Shock go next, and Striker lays down some Reaper damage to quickly cap 0.1. Then Shock win the ult battle on 0.2 to take this map and go to match point in the grand finals. So we're at 3-0, but I want to mention this has like been a back and forth battle. This isn't a quick 3-0, and we'll go into that after this. So we go to Gibraltar, which is naturally our map of the match, right? Maybe some spoilers there, but we start with Rascal and Architect subbing in for Sinatra and Striker because now we're on a cart-based map. That's something they'll probably keep into next season. Shocker on attack here. Shock immediately encounter an aggressive defense from the Titans, and it works for half the time bank, but once the Shock gets set up on the cart with Bastion, their momentum never really stops. The Shock full cap here, and I think at this point, they're winning. Anytime they use Bastion, they're winning about 60% of their fights in the playoffs. So this is just through the whole losers bracket, everything. So they're doing really well. And, Seffi, Brad, our coach on Atlanta, said that you don't sleep on the Bastion comps because they're not easy to do. That's why you don't see every team doing it. We use them a good bit, so I take his word for it. And Shock used it a good bit against us. We saw NYXL pick that up and start using it a good bit against other teams and us. That's kind of why they beat us. But it's like, don't, just because Bastion is in the meta does not mean there's no effort. There's no like, oh, it's ruined. We need to just start shifting every character, right? That's not how this works. There's more to this game than just that. So then Titans go next after Shock full cap. Titans start off in trouble trying to deal with the Rascal known as Rascal, but to do eventually cap 0.1 and they cruise to 0.2, so they make up for it. Unfortunately, the Shock are able to stabilize on 0.3, and Architect once again gets in a position that the Titans have trouble reaching with any viable comp, and Baptiste is up there keeping him up, so there's no real way to like teleport up there and deal with him. So the Shock hold, they become your 2019 Overwatch League champions, and I can't say that any team deserves it more. What a performance. So verdict, Sinatra's worth every penny. I think after doing so many episodes, right? It's episode 60. Sometimes I put my foot in my mouth, and I think there are times when I've said, oh, we're paying Sinatra $200K for what? When Tracer fell out of the meta, whatever. This team, man, is absolutely nutty. It's like I take some pride in it because Brad was there when they built that team, right? He had his hands in the brownie mix, making this thing that's amazing. It's kind of showing teams what the blueprint should be moving forward. So let me start by saying congrats, Sinatra. You're worth it. Congrats, San Francisco Shock. I'm looking forward to our battles next year as usual, but you guys deserved it. You guys you imposed your will on any team you played. Like, if you didn't want them to win, they weren't winning. I mean, there were certain, teams that may slip through the cracks. I'm not going to say any names, but it's one of those cases where, like, you're a dangerous team, and I think you're doing it right. And part of doing it right is, like, utilizing your whole roster. That's something we talked about because we had a lot of teams in the first season that would acquire all these great, talented players and just kind of use them for bargaining chips for trades and not really saying, hey, we have all these tools, how do we use them best? You see how they swap between Sinatra, Striker, and Rascal and Architect, and they have the places where they can focus. Think about how that impacts practice, right? Like you can have them focus on control-based maps and then say, okay, Rascal Architect, focus on cart mechanics and, being able to play this like Pharah Bastion comp that most teams can't pull off. And in this situation, while moving cart and is objective-based gameplay, remember that. So I like that. I like they use their whole roster. I like that everyone has a place. I like that you still understand that everyone is dangerous. You never feel comfortable against who you're playing with. And that's what's going to make a strong team. And I hope teams follow that or fit into that mode soon. And then they always have the killer Nevix waiting to play any character you need him to play. He's probably amazing in practices, right? Like imagine having a scrim utility like that of a guy who can pretty much pick up anything and give you a good battle for it. There are screenshots of his, now that we have roll lock, there's screenshots of him pretty much overall just wrecking in as far as being able to do any little thing or being able to support, being able to tank, being able to DPS, etc. So yeah, props to Shock. So that's done. We have our champions. What's next? Okay. What's next is I kind of want to talk about, one thing I had an idea about, because I started looking at this, blueprint for teams, and I think we do well with using our whole roster. We have a smaller roster, but I kind of think about things like how they use the roster, right? So for example, I've always talked about, and you can tell me if I'm crazy or not, please let me know, comment, whatever, or on Reddit. I think that, for Baby, love Baby, he's doing great. I'm happy we picked him up. But I do think he's not really a momentum style player. Like Bebe comes in hype, right? He comes in hot, he comes in ready to go, and he pops off first map, and he's usually good in your second map. But map 3 is where he kind of peters off, regardless of how the game is going. We could be rolling, we could be on fire. It seems like that's his space. So like what I would do is say, okay, let's pull Babe, no matter what the case is. I don't care how much he's popping off. After 2 maps, pull him out for at least a map. Don't let him play more maps than 2 in a row, right? Regardless of what the overall, how many maps you need to win, whatever the format is. Because like if he gets that break, you bring in Enlier or whatever, Enlier pops off because he likes to click heads. You take him out, you put Baby back in, you get that hype again because he's coming from the dugout. He's hype again. He has that internal, and I think that's the kind of play on things I want to see us do a little bit, and I want to see other teams kind of find that same balance. Use your resources. Don't treat every player like they're just a paycheck, right? Like there were a lot of times when you would hear, and I don't know this for sure, but you hear rumors about people just trying to say, oh, well, we want double what this players actually were, just so they can keep the price high, even though the player's not playing or getting any experience. I don't like that. I want to see everybody play. I want to see everybody play a role, because I think that our league is stacked. It's stacked with players, and we see cool shit happen every day in every game. So the final thing I want to talk about, right? I mean, this is it, right? This is the season over, so I got a lot to get off my chest. So the thing I want to talk about is the overall view on 4-0s versus like 4-3s and 3-2s. The number one thing I heard, right, while we were in Philly and when we came back and on Reddit was, oh, it's a 4-0, this grand finals is a wash. Oh, they got swept, it's over. Like, what a waste. Oh, what a way to end a season, a 4-0. That's not the way to look at it, right? The way points, because you get 4 maps, the way points are represented in Overwatch is very deceptive, right? Like this is episode 60. I've covered a lot of matches, and there are some 3-2s that were nowhere as exciting as this 4-0 was. Yeah, you had this atmosphere. Yeah, you had these other things outside of just the game. But most of these maps went to round 2. Like most of these maps had fights and iconic moments that are going to be used in highlights. Most of these fights showed skill levels that, yeah, you had a Bastion, but the coordination in the organization to pull certain things off, like the play by Janu Sigma for that initiation, like things like that, that's what makes this game good. Vancouver is a good team. Shock was just the better team. That's all it was. So just because it was a 4-0 does not mean it wasn't a good game. And if you think otherwise, please let me know, because I like to hear your view on it. But yeah, that's where I stand. I think don't look at 4-0s and be like, oh, that's it was a wash. Go watch them. I've seen some 3-2s before where it was just like one team rolls, the other team rolls, the other team rolls. There's nothing fun about that either. Especially when the control maps, both the control maps are just complete washes one side. Like they're sometimes shorter than certain 4-0s. So like, get the opinion. People are out there watching the matches. Ask people, hey, was that 4-0 worth the watch? And then go watch it. Don't just see the number and get deceived like that, right? All right, that's all I have to say. So, what's next? What's coming up? Like I said, Overwatch Gauntlet. That's coming up soon. We're going to have the watch party. We're going to talk about it. I don't know if you've seen the bracket. The guy who did the bracket, I can't remember his name. I have to find that and share that. But look for that Gauntlet bracket because it's serious. There's going to be a serious battle there. And I think all those games are going to be really good. So don't let the grand finals, playoff hype die down because it's going straight into that. And then after Gauntlet, naturally, we're going to talk about Worlds as we get closer to BlizzCon. And then we'll talk about what we'll do next after that, right? There's going to be plenty to talk about. Overwatch isn't going anywhere. Trades are happening. People are dropping from teams. Contracts are refreshing. Remember, we had that. So season 1, you had a lot of 1+1 where you had 1 year and then the possibility of extension. So those contracts are wrapping up. So you're having these fresh contracts. There's more money coming into the league. You have all these big sponsors now. So you have a chance of bigger paychecks. So, people are kind of negotiating, blah, blah, blah. So keep an eye out for that. And you can reach me at thebirdwatcherspodcast@gmail.com if you have any inquiries. Twitter is where you can just hit me up at podcast TBW. Follow if you haven't followed to keep up on, retweets, episodes. I post them there as well. Reddit, always active on Reddit. Pretty much always on the competitive Overwatch forums, getting in and argue with somebody. The Birdwatchers podcast there. And then on YouTube, I always mention that, hey, if you listen to podcasts and other things, which you have YouTube Premium, feel free to use that. Or YouTube Music, it might work there too. Not sure. I don't have YouTube Music, but the Birdwatchers on YouTube. And as always, if you've been enjoying the show, if you've been like a loyal listener, or even if you're a new listener, go ahead and like or follow wherever you listen at. Leave a review wherever you listen at and let me know. I like the feedback. I'm always trying new things like the, 2-match format, 1-match format. Can't do 3 matches anymore. Time's not there. But, more details, less details. Do you care more about the standings and me talking about those little bits there? Or do you want to hear about the match in depth, like this kind of style? How much news do you want me to give you? Stuff like that. Like work with me, right? It's just me and you just hanging out. So as always, I appreciate it. Like I said, we'll start to have these episodes regularly again. Not too much is going to change, so you'll hear from me soon. But until then, I will talk to you all next time.
I have destroyed more of your kind than I can count.
Toss them around like trash.
I don't take lessons from you.
Try not to get us killed out there.